Snowflakes weren't the first thing that fell that winter. Before the sky ever opened, it was my guard that slipped. All it took was one quiet walk, and one sentence from her that I still hear in my head when I can't sleep. My name is Lucas Hart. I'm 29 years old, and for the last 4 years I've been living a life that looks perfectly normal from the outside and strangely empty from the inside. I live in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a brick building that's older than I am. The windows rattle when the wind pushes too hard. The heater makes a soft ticking sound all night, and the hallway light outside my door flickers like it can't decide if it still has a purpose. It's not a bad place. It's just quiet. Quiet in a way you feel in your bones. Every weekday morning, I follow the same routine. Wake up to the alarm on my phone, stare at the ceiling for a few seconds, wondering why the first feeling I have is tiredness, not excitement. Then I swing my feet onto the cold floor, make coffee, and watch the city outside my window, try to remember how to wake up too. I work as a junior analyst at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. We help brands tell their story. At least that's what the brochure says. Most of the time, it just means spreadsheets, reports, and slide decks that look more alive than I feel by the end of the day. Still, it pays the rent. It gives my days structure. And for a long time, I thought structure was enough. Before I moved here, my life felt very different. I grew up in a smaller town where winter meant snow days and neighbors who knew exactly how long your family had lived on that street. My parents were the kind of people who never missed a school meeting, never left a message unanswered. Then, in my early 20s, life started to split in quiet ways. My dad had a heart attack when I was 22. My mom never truly came back from the silence that followed. I learned very quickly that some things change you without asking for permission. After my dad passed, I thought throwing myself into work would make the ache less sharp. I moved to the city, got the first job I could, and tried to pretend I was just like everyone else on the subway. Headphones in, backpack on, eyes somewhere between phone screen and nowhere. It worked for a while, or at least it worked enough that I stopped asking myself if I was happy and started asking easier questions, like whether I should try a new coffee place or finally buy heavier gloves for winter. But then came her. My boss's name is Ava Sinclair. She's in her mid-30s, always put together without looking like she's trying too hard. When she walks into a room, people straighten their backs without realizing it. She has this calm, focused energy that makes you feel like your work actually matters when she looks at it. At first, she was just Ms. Sinclair to me, the person I sent reports to, the name at the bottom of calendar. Invites, the voice that occasionally said, "Good work on this," in a hallway, and then moved on to the next meeting. She had her own world, corner office, busy schedule, important clients. And I had mine, second row of desks from the window, a plant that refused to grow, and a coffee mug that always seemed half full of something lukewarm. But little things started to shift. It began with late evenings, the kind you don't plan for but know too well when you work in an office. Most people rushed home as soon as it got dark. I didn't. Not because I loved working overtime, but because staying a bit longer meant I didn't have to face the empty apartment so early. I started to notice that on those late nights, when the office got quiet and the city lights stared in through the glass, Ava was often still there too. Her door open a crack, light spilling out, a stack of papers in her hand, a crease in her brow she didn't have during morning meetings. Sometimes she'd step out and he'd walk past our row of desks, heels soft against the carpet, holding a mug with tea instead of coffee. She'd glance over, see me still there, and ask in this steady voice, "You heading out soon, Lucas?" I'd say something like, "Just finishing this last report," or "Almost done, I swear," and she'd give this small, almost tired smile. "Don't let this place keep you longer than it should," she'd say. "No client is worth losing sleep over." It sounded like casual advice. Maybe it was. But when you're used to moving through your day feeling invisible, even a simple sentence like that can feel like someone pulled a chair out of the fog and told you to sit down. Outside, the season was changing. The air turned sharper. Breath started to show up in front of your face on early mornings. The city felt different in winter, like everything slowed down just enough for you to hear your own thoughts a little more clearly. Street vendors traded cold drinks for hot cups. People walked faster, tucked into their coats, heads tilted down against the wind. From my desk, I could see part of the street below through the narrow slice of window between two pillars. I watched the weather more than I admitted. Maybe because it was something I couldn't control. Maybe because it felt honest. The first time they mentioned snow on the forecast, it was in a casual way. A line in the background chatter by the coffee machine. Apparently, we might get flurries this week. Already? I'm not ready for winter. Someone laughed, someone groaned, someone checked their weather app like it held all the answers. For me, snow always felt like a strange kind of memory. It reminded me of childhood winters, where my dad would come in from, shoveling the driveway, cheeks red, hands freezing, smiling like he'd wrestled the world and won. It reminded me of nights standing at the window, watching the streetlights catch falling flakes, thinking life would always feel that simple. Now, snow didn't mean snow days. It meant slippery sidewalks on the way to work. It meant cold fingers on a keyboard and scarves that never quite sat right on your neck. Still, a part of me waited for it. Inside the office, the days leading up to that first real snowfall were busy. We had a campaign deadline coming up, and Ava seemed even more focused than usual. She moved from meeting to meeting with that same collected calm, but in rare moments when she paused by my desk, I noticed the tiniest signs of tiredness around her eyes. "Are you managing the workload?" she asked me one evening when most people had already left. I nodded. "Yeah, it's a lot, but I'm fine." She looked at my screen, then at me. Fine is usually what people say when they're not fine. I gave a small automatic laugh. "Well, I'm mostly fine." Her lips twitched into a smile. "That's slightly better." She could have walked away after that. She usually did. But instead, she lingered for a second, glancing out at the faint reflection of the city in the window. "Make sure you take some time for yourself this weekend," she said. "The work will still be here on Monday." Her voice wasn't commanding in that moment. It was softer, almost personal, and for a brief second I wondered what she did when she wasn't here. Did she go home to a busy social life, family dinners? Or did she step into a quiet apartment like mine and listen to the sound of her own thoughts in the dark? I didn't ask. I wouldn't have dared. But the question stayed with me. At night, when I got home and hung my coat by the door, I would sometimes replay those short conversations in my head. How she said my name, how she looked not just at my work, but at me. How, in a building full of people, she was one of the few who seemed actually present. Maybe that's why the thought of snow started to feel different this year. It wasn't just about childhood memories anymore. It was about the way the world might slow down enough for two people, accidentally left in the same quiet space, to notice each other. The Friday before the storm, the cold settled in properly, the kind of cold that bites your nose and makes the office windows fog slightly near the edges. People wrapped scarves tighter, typed faster, checked the time more often. Everyone wanted to get home before the weather turned difficult. I stayed a bit later, as usual. So did Ava. The office thinned out around 6, desks emptied, lights clicked off in clusters, the noise level dropped until all I could hear was the hum of the heating system and the occasional distant ring of someone's desk phone. Outside, the sky turned that heavy gray that always looks like it's thinking about snow. I remember looking up from my screen, my eyes sore, and noticing the reflection of the sky in the glass. It felt like a warning and a promise at the same time. I had no idea that the next time I looked, at that reflection, it wouldn't just be the snow I remembered. It would be her walking beside me, our footsteps soft in the white, and the words she'd say that would quietly change the way I saw my life. But that part hadn't happened yet. At that moment, it was just me, my screen, the faint ache in my shoulders, and the feeling that something in my life was slowly shifting, even if I couldn't see it clearly. If you've ever had a season where everything looked the same on the outside, but something inside you knew change was coming, you'll understand exactly where I was standing that night, waiting for the first snow. By the time the first snowflake finally drifted down from the dark sky, I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday night, the kind that felt like it belonged at the end of a long week. The office was warm, but the air outside pressed itself against the windows with a cold whisper, reminding us that winter had fully arrived. I was buried in a report for a client who wanted every number to sound like a promise, not a risk. My eyes were tired, my coffee was cold, my plant looked as defeated as I felt. Most people had left early because of the weather, but the steady tapping of a keyboard in the distance told me I wasn't alone. When I finally stretched in my chair, letting my gaze drift toward the row of offices across the open floor, I saw her light was still on. Ava. Her door was cracked open. The glow from her desk lamp spilled across the carpet, creating a warm, golden path through the dim office. I could hear papers shifting, the soft scrape of a pen, the sound of someone thinking too. Hard. I checked the time, 8:47 p.m. I almost laughed under my breath. There we were again, two people who couldn't seem to go home on time. I stood, rubbed my neck, and walked to the coffee machine, mostly out of habit. The coffee was stale, but the act of pouring it gave me something to do while gathering the courage to look in her direction again. It felt ridiculous, this strange awareness I had of her. I wasn't infatuated, at least not in the dramatic sense people write poems about. It was quieter than that, more like noticing warmth in a room you thought was cold. I turned slightly, pretending to admire the snow outside. That's when her voice drifted from behind me. Still here? I didn't jump, but I definitely hadn't heard her footsteps. I turned. She was walking toward the break area, holding a folder in one hand and a mug in the other. Her hair was tied back, but a few strands had escaped, making her look less like the polished executive who ran Monday. Meetings and more, like someone who had been fighting time all day. "Yeah," I said, trying to finish this report before it grows a second head. She smiled, a real one this time, not the polite professional curve of the lips she used in meetings. "That client again?" "The one and only," I said. "They'll probably want a version where the numbers sparkle." Her laugh was soft, but it echoed a little in the empty room. It felt too pleasant for a Tuesday night. She poured hot water from the kettle, dropped a tea bag into her mug, and stirred slowly. There was something strangely comforting about watching her do something so ordinary. People like her, sharp, confident, always composed, didn't usually show the small, quiet parts of themselves at work, but at that hour, under that soft light, she didn't seem unreachable. She took a sip, then looked at me. "You should go home soon," she said gently. "It's freezing out there." I lifted the mug of stale coffee. "This will keep me warm enough." She gave me a look, one eyebrow raised, half amused, half scolding. "That doesn't count," she said. "That's office fuel, not warmth." For a moment, we stood there watching the snow fall through the window. The flakes drifted slowly, catching the light from street lamps below. Silence settled between us, comfortable and unhurried. No pressure to fill it, no urgency to break it. I don't know why I felt brave enough to ask, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Do you live far?" Her eyes stayed on the window for a beat before turning to me. "Not really," she said. 15-minute walk, maybe 20 in this weather." I nodded, pretending to understand the landmarks she mentioned even though I didn't. Then she asked, "What about you?" "Same direction, actually," I said. "About a 15-minute walk, too." She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, thoughtful in a way. That made my stomach tighten. Not romantic, not professional, something in between, a place I didn't know how to navigate yet. The silence stretched, but not awkwardly. It felt like an invitation to keep talking, or maybe an invitation to stop. I couldn't tell which. "Lucas," she said quietly. Something in the way she said my name made me straighten a little. "You're good at your job," she said. I hope you know that. Heat rushed to my face faster than I could hide it. I cleared my throat, staring at the coffee machine like it held the right response. Thank you, I managed. I really appreciate that. She held my gaze a moment longer. Then she looked away, almost shyly, as if she hadn't meant to say it out loud. I wondered how many people complimented her, not her work, her, the person beneath the title. When she set her mug down, I thought she might head back to her office. Instead, she leaned against the counter beside me, still facing the window, watching the snow come down harder. It's strange, she said softly, how snow makes everything seem quieter, as if the world slows down just so we can think. I nodded. Maybe that's why I've always liked winter more than I admit. A hint of a smile touched her lips. I like it too, especially the first real snowfall. She took a breath, held it for a second, then looked at her watch. It's getting late, she said. I should leave before the streets get worse. I hesitated. My hand tightened around the mug. Yeah, I said. I were just about to head out too. We both knew that wasn't entirely true, but neither of us said anything. She grabbed her coat from the back of a chair and slipped it on, pulling the collar close to her neck. I picked up mine from my desk, shrugging it over my shoulders. When we met again near the elevator, it felt like something had shifted in the space between us. Not outwardly, not openly, but in a way I could feel. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. We stepped inside, stood side by side, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Light, calming, a little like jasmine in winter air. She tapped the button for the ground floor, and we waited in silence as we descended. When the doors slid open, the lobby lights reflected the falling snow outside. The building's glass entrance showed a world that had turned white in the hours we'd been working. Streetlights glowed through the flakes, and cars moved slowly, tires crunching on the layer of ice forming beneath. I zipped up my coat. She buttoned hers. We stepped outside together. The cold was immediate, sharp enough to steal a breath. The wind tugged at my scarf, and my boots sank slightly into the soft snow. She exhaled, watching her breath cloud the air for a moment. Looks worse than I thought, she said, brushing snow from her coat sleeve. I nodded. Sidewalks are probably slippery, too. She hesitated before speaking again. Do you mind if we walk together? Just until our paths split. I felt my heart skip in a way it hadn't in a long time. Not because of romance, not yet, but because walking with someone through winter always felt like sharing a secret. I don't mind, I said quietly. I'd like that. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. We stepped forward at the same time. Our boots made soft prints in the untouched snow as we fell into an easy pace. At first we talked about small things, the weather, the project, the way the office coffee machine had a 40% chance of ruining your day. But then the conversation began to shift in ways I didn't expect. She told me she'd grown up in a coastal town where winter rain replaced snow, and how she missed the ocean's constant sound. I told her about the farm roads back home, how the world looked untouched after a snowfall, like memories were buried under the white blanket. She listened with a kind of attention that made my voice steadier, and when she spoke, she didn't sound like somebody's boss. She sounded like someone who'd been waiting to share parts of herself, too. We passed cafes closing early, their windows glowing with warm light. The scent of roasted chestnuts drifted from a street vendor. Snowflakes clung to her hair, and she reached up to brush them away, laughing softly when they stuck to her gloves. A wave of déjà vu washed over me, a familiar feeling of walking beside someone in winter, sharing breath with the cold air, but I couldn't place the memory. Maybe it wasn't from my past at all. Maybe it was from a story I hadn't lived yet. As we crossed a quiet intersection, the world seemed to slow even more. The streets around us were empty, the snow falling thicker. Street lamps cast a warm halo around her, and for a moment, everything looked softer than reality. We walked a little further, our shoulders almost brushing. The snow muffled the sounds of the city, making every word we shared feel private. I didn't know it then, but that walk would stay with me long after the snow melted, not because of the weather, but because of the silence that followed her next sentence. A sentence she hadn't said yet. We were getting close to the part where our paths would separate, and everything I thought I understood about loneliness was about to change. And that was the night she walked me home for the first time. We didn't talk much at first. There was something about walking through falling snow that made words feel almost unnecessary, like the silence was saying enough on its own. Every sound was softened. Our footsteps sank into the white blanket forming under our boots, leaving a trail behind us that the storm was already beginning to cover. Streetlights glowed like lanterns in the haze, and the flakes drifted slowly through the air, catching the orange light as they fell. It didn't feel like the city anymore. It felt like a dream version of it, where time slowed down just long enough to let you think clearly. Ava tucked her hands into her coat pockets, her shoulders slightly raised against the cold. I could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing, see how the flakes clung to her dark hair before melting away. We walked without hurry, our steps matching without effort. After a few minutes, she spoke. "You know," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I used to hate winter." I glanced over. "Really? Why?" "My hometown barely got snow," she said. "Just rain, cold rain that soaked everything. Winter always felt heavy." She paused, searching for a word. "Lonely, I guess." I nodded. "I know that feeling." She looked at me then, just for a moment, and something in her eyes made the cold feel less sharp. "What about you?" she asked. "Did you always like this kind of weather?" "I didn't when I was little," I said. "I used to complain about how cold it was. But as I got older, I started liking the quiet it brought, the way everything slows down. It's easier to think." She let out a soft laugh, breath clouding in the air. "Thinking too much is dangerous sometimes." "I think too much all the time," I said. "Me too." Our words faded into the sound of snow brushing against our coats and the distant hum of traffic. Cars crawled past us on the road, tires crunching over ice. A bus rumbled by, windows fogged with breath, faces pressed against glass, passengers staring out at the storm like they were traveling through someone else's life. We reached a small park that sat between two buildings, a narrow stretch of trees and benches that usually went unnoticed. Tonight, it looked transformed, covered in a smooth white layer. The branches overhead drooped with fresh snow, and each bench looked like a place where someone could sit and tell a story. Ava slowed her pace. I matched it. "Sometimes," she said softly, "when the weather is like this, I wish I could stop everything for a minute. Just breathe without rushing to the next task." Her voice wasn't fragile, but there was an honesty to it that felt rare. "You ever get tired of being in charge?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. She brushed snow off a railing, watching it fall. "Yes," she said finally. "More often than people think." We kept walking. Our path curved around a row of dim shop fronts. A bakery that smelled faintly of cinnamon. A bookstore with light still glowing in the window. A flower shop whose owner had taped a handwritten sign on the glass. "Closed early. Weather." We paused in front of the bookstore for a moment. The window displayed novels stacked beside winter candles and old maps. One book lay open, pages showing a sketch of two people walking through a forest in the snow. Ava smiled at it. "Do you read?" she asked. "Not as much as I used to," I admitted. "Life got in the way." "That happens to everyone." I looked at her. "Even to you?" She let out a breath that sounded like a confession. "Especially to me." We fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It felt like something was unfolding between us, slowly, gently, without either of us pulling too hard. As we reached the end of the block, the glow of the bookstore faded behind us, and our footsteps echoed along a quieter street. The snow was falling faster now, collecting. On the edges of the sidewalk, I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck. Ava stopped suddenly. "Look," she whispered. I turned to see what she meant. A cat, small and gray, was curled under a storefront awning, pawing at a dried leaf that had blown into its corner. Snow had piled around it like a tiny fort. It looked up at us with sleepy curiosity. Ava crouched down a little, her voice soft. "You poor thing, you must be freezing." The cat blinked slow, trusting. Ava reached out, careful not to startle it, brushing snow gently from its fur. For a moment, the cat leaned into her touch before curling back up. She stood again, dusting off her gloves. "That's why I like the first Snowfall," she said. "It reminds me that there are small things worth noticing, even when you're busy." She looked at me after she said it, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not sudden, not dramatic, just quietly undeniable. We started walking again. My street was only a few blocks away now. The part of the walk where paths would separate was coming closer with each step, though neither of us mentioned it. I felt a strange mix of warmth and dread in my stomach, like wanting something to continue, even though you know it won't. Ava brushed snow from her coat sleeve again. "Do you ever walk just to walk?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "It helps clear my head." She nodded. "I used to, before everything got so busy." We reached the intersection where I always turned right to go home. My building stood 3 blocks down, its familiar outline visible through the snow curtain. I slowed a little, gathering breath. When I turned to tell her that this was where we split, I realized she had stopped walking too. She looked at the snow-covered street, then at me. Her eyes held a softness I'd never seen in the office. "This is your street, isn't it?" she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, this is me." She stared at the snow for a moment, like weighing something she wasn't sure she should say. Her breath came out slowly, visible in the air between us. "I'm glad we walked," I said. "It made the night feel different." She looked up then, meeting my eyes. For a heartbeat, no words passed between us. Only the sound of snow hitting pavement. Only the warmth of shared silence in the cold air. Then she breathed in once, steadying herself. And she said it. "I wish the walk was longer." Her voice wasn't light or playful. It was hopeful, a little vulnerable, like she was admitting something she hadn't meant to let slip. The snow kept falling around us, soft and steady, as if the world had been waiting for those words all night. I didn't know what to say. My thoughts tangled, held between surprise and something deeper I didn't have the courage to name yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Those 6 simple words stayed with me long after she walked away. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator click and sigh like it was trying to warm more than just the room. Outside, snow kept falling long after I'd closed my eyes, covering the streets, the rooftops, and, somehow, every thought I had managed to keep buried for months. I wish the walk was longer. Those words played on repeat, looping in my head like a song you can't unhear. It wasn't what she said that kept me awake, but how she said it, as if time had slipped for a moment and she let something real escape. By morning, the city was muffled under a white sheet. I made coffee without tasting it, pulled on clothes without noticing what I chose, and stepped outside into the cold air with her sentence tucked somewhere under my coat, like a secret. At work, everything looked normal. Desks in their usual rows, the soft buzz of computers waking up, the coat rack with more scarves than people. But inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. She arrived a few minutes after I did. I heard the sound of her heels before I saw her, a steady rhythm that usually blended into the background of the office, but today felt like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. When she walked past my desk, she gave me a small nod. Professional, polite, collected. But her eyes, just for a second, held something warmer, something that felt like recognition. Then she disappeared into her office, and the door stayed open just a sliver, the way it always did. I stared at my screen, trying to focus on numbers, but every digit blurred into white noise. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, useless. I wasn't thinking about spreadsheets. I was thinking about how her voice sounded when she said those 6 words, soft and low under the snowfall, like she didn't want the night to end either. By late morning, I finally gave up pretending to be focused and slipped into the break room to pour another cup of coffee. The machine sputtered like it was tired, too. I leaned against the counter, rubbing my hands together for warmth, when I heard the light click of footsteps behind me. Lucas? Her voice. I turned so quickly I almost dropped the cup. She stood a few feet away, her hair down this time, strands brushing her shoulders. She looked rested, but her eyes held something thoughtful, like maybe sleep hadn't come easily for her either. "I wanted to check on you," she said. I blinked. "Check on me?" "You were quiet this morning, more than usual." I let out a shaky breath. I didn't know what to say without saying too much. "I'm okay, just tired." "From work?" she asked gently. Or maybe she meant something else. I swallowed. "Partly." A small silence settled between us, not awkward, familiar. She stepped closer, keeping her voice low, even though the office was buzzing outside. "About last night?" My chest tightened. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," she said. "You didn't," I answered too quickly. Her gaze held mine a moment longer, searching, as if she wanted to believe me, but wasn't sure she should. I wondered if she had replayed the moment too. Wondered if she felt the same pull I was trying so hard to ignore. She nodded slightly. "Okay." Then she stepped back, a polite distance, a safe one. "I'll see you at the noon meeting?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'll be there." She gave me a small, almost relieved smile before walking away. And I stood there holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold again. The days that followed were filled with subtle shifts. Nothing anyone else would notice, but everything I felt more deeply than I wanted to admit. She asked for my opinion more often in meetings, listening closely, like my thoughts mattered beyond the spreadsheet. She paused at my desk some mornings, not to talk about work, but to ask how I was sleeping, or whether I'd tried the new cafe around, the corner. I didn't always know what to say, but I knew how those moments made me feel. Seen. Once, late in the afternoon, our eyes met across the conference room table. It was only a few seconds, a passing glance, but it was enough to make my heart knock against my ribs. She looked away first, but not quickly. Not like I'd imagined it. I told myself I was imagining everything, that it was just kindness, that I was reading into nothing. But some nights, as I walked home through streets still dusted with snow, I replayed every detail, the way she listened, really listened, the way her smile softened when she forgot to be formal, the way the office felt warmer when she was nearby. I tried to convince myself it was harmless. Just admiration, just attention from someone I respected. But deep down, I knew it was more complicated than that. Because every time I passed the street where we'd stopped that night, I heard her voice again. I wished the walk was longer, and time I heard it, something inside me stirred in quiet rebellion against the life I thought I had settled into. A life of routines, safe choices, and emotions kept neatly tucked away. One evening, a week after the snowfall, I stayed late again. The office was dim, lights turning off one row at a time, as sensors detected emptiness. I told myself I was staying to finish a report, but I wasn't sure I believed it. I sensed her presence before I heard her, that soft warmth that seemed to gather around her like a second coat. "You're here late again," she said from behind me. I turned. She stood in the half-light, her coat draped over her arm, hair slightly messy like she'd been running her hand through it. She looked less like a boss and more like a person who had had a long day too. "I could say the same to you," I replied, her lips curved into a tired smile. "Touché." I saved my work and shut the laptop. For a moment, We stood in the quiet space between desks. Two people whose lives were supposed to run parallel, but kept leaning toward each other anyway. "Are you walking home?" she asked. I nodded. The silence stretched, not hesitation, but possibility. Then she said, just above a whisper, "Would you like company?" My breath caught. I wanted to say yes. The word was right there growing warm in my chest. But a dozen thoughts collided in my mind. What if I misunderstood her? What if she regretted her words from that night? What if this walk meant something I wasn't ready to face? She must have seen the conflict in my eyes because she added, softer still, "No pressure, I just wouldn't mind the fresh air." Something in her tone made my answer easy. "I'd like that," I said. Her shoulders relaxed, just a little, like she'd been holding her breath too. We walked out together, the same doors we had used a week before, but everything felt different. The air was warmer now, the snow thinner on the ground, but the distance between us felt closer somehow, not in steps, but in understanding. We didn't talk much that night either. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. When we reached the turn toward my street, we paused, just like before. But she didn't say the same sentence this time. Instead, her gaze lifted to mine, and for a long second, neither of us looked away. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "About what?" Her breath curled in the air. "About that walk." My heart thudded. "And?" I asked, her voice softened to almost nothing. "About how I didn't really want it to end." The words hit me deeper than I expected. Not dramatic, not explosive, just honest in a way that slipped past every wall I'd built. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to choose words that meant something, words that wouldn't undo the moment. "I didn't either," I said finally. She nodded once, small, almost shy. Then she looked away, letting the night hide her expression. She didn't ask for a longer walk that evening. She didn't need to, because the moment had already stretched itself, quietly, steadily into something neither of us could pretend was just a coincidence anymore. And as she walked away, her boots leaving prints in the half-melted snow, I realized something. Sometimes a sentence doesn't change your life all at once. Sometimes it grows inside you quietly, one day at a time, until suddenly you're someone who can't go back to who you were before you heard it. The snow didn't last forever. It never does. Within a week, the sidewalks had turned into slush, the rooftops faded back to their usual gray, and the white blanket that once softened every noise melted into gutters that trickle past the curbs. But even after the ice disappeared, winter felt different to me. It wasn't the weather that changed. It was what I carried inside it. Every time I put on my coat after work, I remembered the sound of snow settling on our shoulders. Every time I passed the window near the elevator, I saw the reflection of two people walking a little too close for coincidence. And every time I reached the street where we paused that first night, her words came back softer than echo, heavier than memory. I wish the walk was longer. I didn't know what came next, and for a while, neither did she. We fell back into our routines, but the space between us never quite returned to what it had been. There was awareness now, a quiet pull that made even ordinary moments feel layered with something more. Some mornings, she'd pass by my desk and ask if I'd slept enough. Some afternoons, I'd catch her leaning on her office doorway, staring at the sky like she was thinking about somewhere else. Some evenings, we'd leave the office around the same time, not planned, not arranged, just naturally aligned, like our footsteps, and had learned each other's rhythm. But we didn't walk home together again, not right away. Maybe we were both waiting for something neither of us could name. Then came another late night. I didn't plan to stay late. Deadlines were lighter that week. But the office felt strangely calm that evening. The windows reflected the city lights in soft blurs, and the heater hummed gently like a lullaby. I found myself lingering longer than I needed to, scrolling through emails slowly, pretending the work required more attention than it really did. There were only a few people left by the time the sky turned dark. I stood to stretch my back, planning to head out, when I noticed a light still glowing through the glass walls of her office. Ava. She was at her desk, hand resting against her temple, staring at a document but not really reading it. I could tell, the same way you can tell when someone is holding a thought they can't let go. I walked past her door quietly, not wanting to intrude, but before I reached the hallway, her voice found me. "Are you leaving?" I turned. She looked up, eyes tired but warm. "In a minute," I said. "You?" She let out a soft breath. "I think I should, but I'm still here." "Sometimes that's the hardest part," I said. A small smile formed on her lips, not wide, not dramatic, but enough to lift some of the weight from her expression. "Walk with me?" she asked. There was no hesitation in her voice, and this time I didn't hesitate either. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." Outside, the cold had returned, not snow, not yet, but the kind of crisp air that hinted at it. The streets were quieter than usual. Street lamps stretched long reflections across damp pavement. We walked side by side, no rush, no agenda, just steps and breathing and silence that felt safe. A few blocks passed before either of us spoke. "You ever feel like you're moving forward but not actually going anywhere?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "Sometimes I think I'm just repeating days, hoping the next one feels different." She nodded, her gaze drifting toward the shop windows we passed. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." "About the job?" I asked. "About everything," she replied. I didn't push, I just waited. Ava wasn't someone who rushed her thoughts. She offered them slowly, like someone handing over something fragile. After a moment, she spoke again. "I spent so many years climbing," she said quietly, "trying to prove something. To myself, to my family, to anyone who ever doubted I could lead." She paused, hands tightening in her pockets. "But lately, I've been wondering what I lost while I was proving it." Her voice didn't break. It wasn't that kind of confession. But there was softness in it, the kind that comes from saying something true for the first time out loud. "I think everyone loses something," I said. "The trick is noticing before it's gone for good." She looked at me, and the streetlight above us reflected in her eyes like tiny stars floating in dark water. "I noticed," she whispered. The wind brushed past us, cold enough to make us both pull our coats tighter. We walked on, turning down a quieter side street, one I didn't usually take. It was narrower, lined with old brick buildings and lamps that cast warm halos on the ground. "This isn't your usual route home," she said. I shrugged, smiling a little. "Maybe tonight I don't need the usual." Her breath formed a small cloud in the air. "I was hoping you'd say that." My chest tightened, not painfully, but in that way where warmth gathers behind your ribs and doesn't quite know where to go. We kept walking, slower now, like neither of us wanted to reach the end. And then she said it, not the same words as before, but close enough that they pulled at the same thread inside me. "Do you mind if we take the longer way?" I stopped walking just for a moment and looked at her. Her expression wasn't guarded. It wasn't distant. It wasn't professional. It was honest. "No," I said softly. "I don't mind at all." She smiled, small, real, and fell into step beside me again. The longer way home wasn't dramatic. There was no music, no grand gesture, no confession that shattered the night. Just two people walking through city streets, sharing the kind of quiet that feels like a beginning. She told me about the book her father used to read to her when she was little. I told her how I still kept my dad's winter scarf in a drawer I never opened. She told me she used to dream of being a writer before life led her another way. I told her I didn't know what I dreamed of anymore, but lately I'd started to wonder again. We never held hands. We never touched. We didn't need to. The closeness came from everything we didn't say outright, but Mon understood anyway. When we finally reached the corner before my street, she slowed, then stopped. Her breath curled in the cold air as she looked at me, steady, unhurried. "This was nice," she said. "It was," I agreed. Her eyes softened, not with longing, but with recognition. You know, I didn't just want the walk to be longer that first night, she said. I wanted the moment to be. I felt something inside me warm slowly, like the first light after dawn. I understand, I said. Her lips curved. I thought you might. For a minute, neither of us moved. The street was quiet. A car passed in the distance. Somewhere nearby, a window closed with a soft thud. Then she took one small step backward, as if rehearsing a farewell she hadn't planned. "I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked, not as a boss, but as someone hoping for the answer. "Yeah," I said. "I'll be there." She nodded once, letting the silence fall gently between us, the kind that doesn't end a moment, but keeps it alive. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her until her figure blended into the glow of the street lamps, until her steps were just echoes, until the corner swallowed her silhouette. And even then, I stood there a little longer, letting the cold settle into my coat while the warmth settled into my chest. The walk home felt shorter after she left. Maybe because something inside me had changed shape. Maybe because some distances feel smaller when someone shares them with you. Or maybe because I finally understood what she meant that first night. Sometimes the longest walk isn't measured in streets or steps. Sometimes it's measured in how far two people travel toward each other without moving closer than a breath. And sometimes the shortcut home is taking the longer way with someone who makes the night feel warmer than the weather allows.